Thank you. We have been given 30 minutes to go through this long topic of, am I audible? Okay. So let's get into this last leg of the marathon conference that we have had. And I will straight away start with my first case. This is regarding a child, 8-month-old Master Patel. This boy was brought to us in the month of July. He had fever for last 2 days when he was brought to us. They were accompanied with rigors. There was vomiting, and mother also gave a history that he was crying excessively while passing urine. This definitely made our life easy. On examination, we found him to be febrile with a temperature of 39.5 degrees Celsius. He was alert, his fontanelle was normal, his ears were normal, and he has grown well otherwise till now. He was also found to be dehydrated. There was grade 1 dehydration, and there were no other localizing signs. Dr. Jyoti, could you tell us what other clinical features we should look for to rule out or suspect structural urinary abnormalities in this child?
So for a child less than 1 year old with UTI, that itself is a setting to suspect an underlying abnormality. In a male, poor urinary stream, difficulty in passing urine or straining while passing urine is a very good clue. Palpable kidneys on examination, palpable urinary bladder, again would indicate some obstruction in the urinary tract. We should also look for subtle signs like anything which would suggest a spina bifida occulta. Of course, if there are obvious signs like a patulous anus or lower limb deficits, then you would know that you have an underlying neurogenic bladder.
Yeah, thank you. We did examine for renal angle tenderness, which is always difficult. The bladder was not palpable, and as doctor mentioned, there were no other features. And since clinically it was suspected to be a urinary tract infection, a urine routine was asked after, of course, ruling out malaria and a complete blood count which was carried. This urine routine microscopy revealed a protein 1+, leukocytes were 40 to 50 per high power field, and there were 4 to 5 RBCs per high power field. So Dr. Jyoti, could you please enlighten us whether we could call it abnormal and whether we should ask our pathologist to tell us whether this was from a centrifuge or non-centrifuge sample?
So this is certainly an abnormal urine analysis with the leukocyte count of 40 to 50 per high power field. The cutoff is usually 5 per high power field. When you're talking about centrifuge versus uncentrifuge, if you have a report per high power field, it's always on a centrifuge or a spun sample, which has been the sediment has been loaded on a slide. An uncentrifuged sample is analyzed on a cell counting chamber, that is a Neuber chamber, and you would get the report as millimeter cubed. And a cell count of more than 10 per cc is significant pyuria.
Thank you. We also would like to know something about dipstick or lapsticks, as the brand name would have it, versus urinary microscopic, the advantages, disadvantages, and the guidelines to follow on them.
So in the context of urinary tract infection, lapsticks we are looking at which is because of dietary nitrates in the urine which are converted to nitrites by the bacteria, and leukocyte esterase, which is an enzyme produced by the leukocytes. So if you have dipsticks, which we do have dipsticks, which will check for both nitrites and leukocyte esterase, you miss only 15% of the UTIs. Combined with cultures, it's a very, very useful test to diagnose UTI when you suspect it in a clinical setting of UTI. Microscopy has a sensitivity of something like 76% and a specificity which is lower. So I would say that in addition, the dipsticks have this great advantage that you are doing it in your clinic and you have the report straight away. So it is very easy in the setting of a febrile infant. If you have a high clinical index of suspicion, no other focus for the fever, and if your dipsticks are positive, you can safely start antibiotics after sending the culture. So I find this is a very, very useful modality.
And what would it cost us if you keep a lapstick in your office?
Okay, so a bottle of 100 strips costs 1,500.
So it's 15 rupees approximately for a child.
Absolutely, and very useful.
Thank you. So as you said, we did send a culture, and culture had grown E. coli with a colony count of more than 10 raised to 5 per colony forming units per ml. On sensitivity report, it was found to be sensitive to third generation cephalosporins, aminoglycosides, cotrimazole, and nitrofurantoin.
Dr. Tushar, can I interrupt here 1 minute if you don't mind? Since we are going ahead now, urine microscopy, as Jyoti said that, pyuria more than 5, but also it is important a gram staining of a, unstained sample. If it shows a gram negative motile bacilli, that definitely, sort of confirms, because the sticks are fine, but sticks have their own problems. In our country with the heat and humidity and all, sometimes they go really, they don't work that well. Availability is another problem, because you have to get multi-sticks, lap sticks, and sometimes it happens that it's easy to send microscopy. We are all used to sending a sample, fresh sample, or you have a side lab in your office, and I think you can do these two, and that would definitely clinch the diagnosis of UTI.
Sure. So what are the preferred methods for collection of urine culture, storage and transport? Dr. Jyoti, please.
Okay, so the preferred method for children who can voice their voiding desire, that means toilet trained children, preferred method is a midstream clean catch sample. There's no doubt about that. And the clean catch is after cleaning the area with water and soap, and you're discarding the first urine voided. So that means you're collecting a midstream, that's what it means. And for children who are not toilet trained, you have two options. That means for infants, suprapubic aspiration is easy to perform with little bit of experience, and the other option is a clean in-out catheterization.
Your thoughts on bag collection?
Okay, bag collection, if you get a negative report on bag collection, is the advantage that it's easy to perform. But the only usefulness is if nothing grows, then you're sure there is no UTI. If something grows, it could just be a contaminant. So that's the usefulness of a bag collection. I see that you have a question on storage and transport as well.
Once we have collected the culture, how quickly we need to send it across, and if we can't send it quickly, how do we store it till we transport it?
So to be kept at room temperature, to be plated by at least within the first 4 hours, within 2 hours if possible, but within the first 4 hours is fine. Otherwise, refrigerate. You can refrigerate for about 24 hours before plating.
Madam, could you please tell us how to interpret this culture report, and when do we suspect a report as from a contaminated sample?
I would put down one very, very important message is, without a urine culture, you can't confidently put down the diagnosis of a UTI. That is number one. And the colony count of E. coli more than 10 raised to power of 5, this is the sample which is collected, per urethra. But if you are sending a catheterized sample, the latest definition of American Academy of Pediatrics, and everybody would follow it, is 50,000 colonies per ml. And that is because, the distal urethra contamination is not there when you put the catheter in the bladder. And if you are sending the, sample from the suprapubic puncture, then any organism is as good as 10 raised to power 5. So after having made clear, depending on from where the urine is coming, this seems to be very definitely a urinary infection. And then we have a sensitivity to third generation cephalosporin. The advantage of the culture is, even though you might have started the antibiotic, depending on the local antibiotic sensitivity report of your hospital or institution, when you get the culture after 48 hours, and especially if the response is not good, you should change the antibiotic. And it is well known that now it is found beyond doubt that unless the child is vomiting, very sick, dehydrated, and the child looks, unable to take the antibiotic, oral is as equally efficacious as intravenous. So it's only if you are going to admit the child, hospitalize the child, then we might use the third generation cephalosporin like ceftriaxone or cefotaxime. Otherwise, you can use oral like cefixime for a child. I mean, if you're talking of 8-month-old child. And then, of course, wait for 48 hours. If you have used the appropriate antibiotic within 48 hours, there should be response as far as the fever is concerned. This child was febrile, had chills and rigors. So you look at the clinical side of it, and within 48 hours, if there is a deference of fever and the child is looking better and accepting feeds, that is more important than sending a second culture. You don't have to send a second culture. The first culture is good enough. And the duration of the treatment, again, there is a little, sort of a controversy, but minimum 7 days, but preferably 14 days. But the last word is not out, whether you can give for 7 days or 10 days or 14 days. So depending on, again a response, you may, but we at Wadia, and I'm sure I don't know about Jyoti and Pankaj what they do, but we would prefer a 14 days course of treatment.
When do we suspect the sample as a contaminated sample?
If there are more than 2 organisms, and that too they are non-pathogenic, or they do not fit in with the commonest 80% of the time we have E. coli. And a child like this who was otherwise healthy, one would expect. But suppose we had found Proteus, or we had found some Enterococci, and that too, 2 organisms, one would have suspected a contamination.
So do we still call them as upper UTI, lower UTI, or should we now diagnose them as simple and complicated UTI?
Actually, one does not make this distinction between upper UTI and lower UTI, especially in the young children and infants anymore, because genitourinary system is a continuum, and that is why, and one should treat whatever the, sort of whether the symptoms are pertaining to upper UTI or lower UTI, as in this child, painful stream, as upper UTI. And complicated UTI is, this child probably had a complicated UTI, because this child was sick with rigors, with vomiting, with dehydration, and had a urinary symptoms. So such children should be called complicated UTI. That means there is something else which is happening, there is an underlying lesion, and one should try to identify and treat simultaneously.
So Dr. Jyoti, as ma'am said, we consider this as complicated UTI and an 8-month-old child. We have not yet distinguished between boy and a girl. So should he be hospitalized? Madam has already answered that you should be complicated UTIs for first couple of days we could give IV, and once they are able to take orally or show response, we can continue on oral. Could you tell us the drug of choice and how long treatment to be given on this particular complicated UTI?
Since this patient's sensitivity pattern showed sensitive to ceftriaxone, I would go use ceftriaxone, because it would be easier to switch on to another cephalosporin for oral therapy. And as madam has mentioned, the duration of therapy could be 10 to 14 days, because it's an infant who has a complicated UTI. The smaller the baby, the more, you tend to treat for a longer duration.
What is the role of alkalization of urine?
Okay. So traditionally, alkalization of urine has been done, but studies have shown, and these studies have usually been done in adult women, from where it was actually the treatment originated because they had symptoms of cystitis. So there's no scientific basis for it. The urine pH before or after giving alkalization doesn't help. But since symptoms improve and it's a safe therapy, it can be given. The basis of its effectiveness is possibly either placebo effect, or because usually what is used is potassium citrate, and a large amount of fluids are recommended along with it. So maybe it's the excess fluids which are helping.
The organizers have been kind enough to give us 10 minutes extra, so we will make use of that, and I'm going to go little slow on now. So, madam, we completed the treatment of the acute problem, so we were now contemplating antibiotic prophylaxis for this child. Could you help us with the drug of choice and the duration for this, ma'am?
You are asking me?
Yes, ma'am.
Actually, a lot has been said recently, and I'm glad we are having this discussion today rather than 2 weeks earlier, because during the last one whole week, we have got guidelines which are revised from American Academy of Pediatrics. You found our consensus statement of the expert group of Indian Society of Pediatric Nephrology, which has come in the last issue, September issue of
Indian
IP.
Pediatrics.
And you find that there is a tremendous contradiction sometimes in these journals. I'm already receiving 2-3 calls every day to find out which one should apply. So what I would like to mention is antibiotic prophylaxis. As far as the Western literature is concerned, both American Academy of Pediatrics and NICE Group. NICE Group is a National Institute for Children of Clinical Excellence from UK. and most of the time it is addressed to the general practitioners who are the first time primary caregivers for their, the system is such that the general practitioner sees. If they can't handle, then they refer to the pediatrician and then to pediatric nephrologist. It has been said that the antibiotic prophylaxis is not indicated, which is exactly the U-turn from what they were saying. And what is important that we cannot apply, I would always say, I'm taking 1 or 2 minutes more because we have been given time.
10 minutes more now.
I always feel that knowledge about what's happening globally is important, but advocate what is happening locally. The people in WHO and whoever are in the American Academy and all, they do not know that there are large number of patients who are in slums of urban and also, rural areas, where it is very difficult for them to follow exactly how the antibiotic prophylaxis should be given, number one. And number two, what is most important is, when you start antibiotic prophylaxis, if at all you want to give, adherence to the daily regime very strictly and follow-up of this child whenever required, whenever the fever comes with a urine examination is of utmost important. So adherence of this to the regime as well as follow-up, if you are not doing, then antibiotic prophylaxis will be useless. And the third important is, why do you want to give antibiotic prophylaxis? Because antibiotic prophylaxis or whatever treatment you are giving to these children is to prevent the renal scar from occurring. And more a data is emerging, especially by the systematic review and all the meta-analysis and Cochrane or whatever. I think Ira would be very happy that we are quoting all these things because she wants the evidence-based. From the 6 series which have been recently analyzed, about 1,000 children, it has been found that whether you give prophylaxis or you don't get prophylaxis, the number of recurrence of the urinary infection remain the same in those who have normal ultrasound, in those who have grade 1, 2, 3, 4 reflux, which is the common cause of a recurrence. So what I would like to mention, whatever the American Academy may be applying to the patients of our country in the urban high population with a high health care, like in Bombay one would say, all affluent class educated mothers who will follow whatever you tell them. But one should not apply the same thing as far as, our patients who come to the regular OPDs in a public, So what we do in a child like this, it is very definitely ultrasonography is required because we want to find out what is underlying structural malformation. So we would give 14 days of treatment, as Jyoti has mentioned. I would do the same thing, and I would cover the child during his process for a short period of time, maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks, do the ultrasound, and if required, MCU. So during that period I would give. Further on, I do not think I would advocate the antibiotic prophylaxis unless, depending on what the ultrasound shows or MCU, then we can decide further. So short period of time covering the period where the chance of recurrence is there because of the procedures that we are going to do, especially MCU where the catheterization is required.
Dr. Pankaj wants to add something. Sure.
Yeah.
Right. I agree with Madam to an extent. There's 2 things that we need to remember. I mean, there are studies in the West, and again, yes, it is Western population, but then the medicines are free there. Please understand the prophylactic antibiotics are hardly taken. Kate Various-Jones study showed that 50% of them don't take it. So you write on paper, the child hardly takes it. In fact, I usually don't attend tuberculosis lectures, but one of the tuberculosis lectures which I attended, the DOTS person who was actually talking to the audience said that people who take medicines regularly are abnormal. So if you are telling a child to take prophylactic antibiotics for 2 years, believe me, they'll not take it. Okay, you always have a Gaussian curve. 5% of the population will diligently follow what you are saying, 5% will not follow what you are saying anyway, and 90% will give it some time. So it's not going to happen all the time. And sorry, the second thing it escaped my mind. I'll come back to it in a little while.
So do we give prophylaxis for, assuming that we have a grade 4 reflux on one side, which I'm going to show in my next slide on ultrasound? Does this child go home on antibiotic prophylaxis till we have an MCU? And if MCU shows the same thing, Does he take it till he's 5 years old and or till he
No.
has regression? Or
He's 8-month-old, right?
only 8 months old.
Yeah, I would continue till he's 1 year old or till the next MCU is done, or the DMSA scan which is done does not show any scarification. Then I would again sit with the family, sit with the mother, counsel, give them options. I think explaining to the parental discussion with the parent and the parental sort of acceptance is equally important, because who's going to give the antibiotic to the child? The mother. And if she doesn't feel comfortable, I think we will have to give her another option, and that is whenever the child gets fever without focus of infection, please get a urine examination done again like the first infection, and then sort of come back to us.
In cases where we require long-term prophylaxis, is there a role for cyclical prophylaxis as we were calling earlier? And in case somebody gets a breakthrough UTI on prophylaxis, do we need to start after treating the acute infection on a new prophylactic drug, or the same prophylactic drug can be continued?
I think cyclic prophylaxis is given up. Yeah,
Sorry, Dr. Pankaj.
No, please,
Yeah,
please.
yes.
You want sorry. No, carry on.
See, I think we need to understand, as Madam was explaining, why we give prophylaxis. The prophylaxis is not a cure-all for everything. It is to prevent general infections that are present. So 90% of infections you will prevent, 10% you will still get because the bugs are resistant to the antibiotic or whatever. Now, when we talk of a breakthrough infection, now whether you have got reflux or you haven't got reflux, remember reflux starts right at the beginning. You get an infection because something else has changed. And this something else usually is a local problem. That there is a problem with voiding, there is a problem with local factors. So your prophylaxis has nothing to do with it. In fact, we need to learn from the patients who actually don't follow what we are advising them. I believe Dr. Ponde completely when he talked about angiographies, and he said that he had patients who advised angiographies who said we don't want angiographies or angioplasties, and what happened to them later on? They actually did better. That's exactly what is happening, because you prescribe prophylaxis, the patients go away, they don't take prophylaxis, they don't get UTIs for 2 years. And the patients who come back to us, who we are putting on prophylaxis, they are getting infections because we are missing something. Reflux doesn't cause infections, reflux propagates an infection. So what we need to be looking at is local factors, which I think is there later on in the talk, but that applies to every child, whether it is 5 months old, 6 months old, or 6 years old. Because unless you treat the local factors properly, you're going to keep on getting recurrent infections. Changing an antibiotic is not going to change anything there. That is why no cyclical antibiotics, and breakthrough infections, please find out why the infection occurred, not reflux. There is something else which has caused the infection to occur.
My question was slightly direct, it was directed on other lines. Some of us previously were taught that cyclical prophylaxis, in order to prevent resistance to the antibiotic prophylaxis and gut flora changes, as well as, so clarifying the doubt that there is no such thing as cyclical prophylaxis, and even if there is a breakthrough UTI, you still, if you are giving, an indication still exists, you continue to give the same antibiotic. Okay, so we go to the next question. I think we have exhausted our 10 bonus minutes, so let's go ahead with as the rapid fire session now. What imaging studies needs to be done now? Timing of each of them. Role of repeat urine already, urine culture madam is already addressed, so we'll stick to the first two questions. Dr. Deshpande?
Okay. Madam, you want to take?
No, please.
Right. Imaging studies, I told him that I want to talk about this point. The reason being, there are 3 talks.
Yeah, that's why I said our 10 bonus minutes are over. So
Please go
ahead.
The 3 tests that people talk about, ultrasound, DMSA, and MCU. I think he's got guidelines later on. I'm not going to talk about them. I just want to tell you the timings of each one of them. An ultrasound scan is an urgent investigation in the sense that if a child is admitted, do it at the time when the child is admitted. If in an office UTI, do it in the first week of urine infection that you have started treating. In terms of the second test, which is a DMSA scan, it is called a dimercaptosuccinic acid for those who fancy long names. Now you need to understand that this is actually a radioactive dye that is picked up by the proximal tubular cells, and all it tells you is whether there are functioning nephrons or not. It does not tell you anything more than that. So there are 2 problems here. One, acute changes after an episode of pyelonephritis can last as long as 4 to 6 months. Okay, Jacobson's paper, there are several papers which have looked at that. So if you do a DMSA scan early after a urine infection, you're landing yourself in trouble because you do not know whether these are acute changes or chronic changes. We are not interested in acute changes because the role of an acute DMSA in our conditions is not there at all. We are doing it for chronic changes that are present. So chronic changes will be present only when you look at a DMSA scan 4 months, at least 4 months after a urine infection is done. Ideally 6 months. Better 1 year. I don't think DMSA is going to change your management to the extent that suddenly something life-saving is going to be done. What you are interested in is the long-term implications of the DMSA scan. So that's the first thing. So acute changes will be early, therefore do not do the DMSA scan early. I see DMSA scans, I've got lovely pictures of them, we don't have time for that, at 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, which become completely normal when you do the DMSA 6 months later. Those are not chronic changes. The second thing about a DMSA scan, I'm very sorry about this, but you have to look at the pictures yourself. Just like Dr. Amdekar said, somebody in the lab cannot tell you what this is. Every report in Bombay or elsewhere, I don't know about Pune, comes back as scarred kidneys. No, it is only going to show you a reduced uptake of the dye. The interpretation of what is causing that reduced uptake depends on me, depends on you. It doesn't depend on the person who's doing the scan. Because the clinical history and clinical significance only you will know because you are seeing the patient. Why am I saying that? You can have, for example, a scar which is a typical wedge-shaped defect which is not seen and still it's past of its scarring. Secondly, a dysplastic kidney will also give rise to an abnormal DMSA in exactly the same way except that it has amorphous looking outline, a very irregular outline. The third, I don't think Bhavesh is here, but we recently had a child, I don't ask for it, but DMSA was asked in a child with proven interstitial nephritis which was reported as scarring. Any nephritis will give rise to changes on the DMSA. So you are going to decide what the child has, not the person who's doing the scan. So these two things about DMSA. The third, MCU, I think we overdo MCUs a lot. That's my feeling. I don't know what the other panelists feel because I don't think reflux is the be all and the end all. But when you do MCUs, please cover them with antibiotics. I've seen enough patients who have had an MCU and a UTI after that. And then you start following all the guidelines again, recurrent UTI. You started in the first place by not covering him with antibiotics when the child had an MCU. So please do MCUs under antibiotic cover. Give them a treatment dose of antibiotics, I don't care. And secondly, the MCU you can do about 2 to 3 weeks after the acute UTI has settled down. Thank you.
Dr. Jyot?
Yeah. I
Can I
also have a comment.
Sure.
After you.
I just want to add that it's equally important to see the MCU yourself or to discuss it with a pediatric surgeon, just as much as a DMSA or an needs to be seen by yourself.
I would read yourself as the pediatric nephrologist. I don't know how to read a...
Okay, so maybe you can
DMSA
discuss
scan.
it with a pediatric surgeon, especially if
So-
you have a clinical setting, you know.
Some of the things Dr. Deshpande has already covered. Dr. Jyoti, if you could quickly tell us how would the investigation differ, if at all they would differ, for boy versus a girl, depending on the age of child of first episode of UTI, and in a child who has first UTI versus a recurrent.
I would like to
UTI.
mention one
Yes, ma'am.
moment. What we perceive as a first UTI sometimes is not the first UTI. With all due respect to all the pediatricians in this, but any child with a fever, they say no focus of infection, but the child is crying, so probably otitis media. They give amoxicillin for 4-5 days without sending a urine examination. We don't know. The child was crying probably because of the pain in abdomen. And what I want to say is, hence in our country we cannot apply exactly what's happened in UK or in America, because larger number of children must be coming with a second or a recurrent UTI, and from that point of view also we should really, analyze their history. And I think it's the pediatrician, the onus responsibility is on the pediatricians before they start the, investigation.
USG was done. It showed right-sided VUR with uroendothelial thickening and mildly enlarged right kidney. So is the diagnosis now any different than what it was earlier of complicated UTI with 8-month-old child? And whether treatment would be different, or is there any difference between pyelonephritis versus complicated UTI?
I think we've touched upon this earlier, so there's no difference really.
Sure. Thank you. So he completed his 14 days of treatment, which was starting with IV and subsequently on oral. And we did start oral antibiotic prophylaxis because of the grade 4 VUR, waiting for a MCU to be done because he was an 8-month-old child. MCU again confirmed the right-sided grade 4 VUR, and no other structural abnormalities were noted. I think doctor has already detailed us on DMSA. Here I have asked for a DMSA after 3 months, and now we would probably do it at 4 to 6 months. So, Dr. Deshpande, yeah, correct. Your views on circumcision, Dr. Jyoti will address the last one.
Yeah. We will play a small game of question and answers. Don't think about your Nelson. I just wanted to answer whatever comes to your mind.
Yeah.
First question, do you think a single UTI is capable of destroying 20% of the kidney?
No, this could
Generally
be a
not.
dysplastic
One.
kidney.
So that's
Simple
right.
answer. So the fact is, this has been there probably right from the beginning.
From the
Okay,
beginning.
so that is called as renal dysplasia. Now the second fact, which I am not going to touch upon, is the reflux. Reflux has been present right from birth.
Yes.
So UTI occurring at 8 months is, again, as I said earlier, something else has happened at that time. Now if I'm going to ask you a very simple question, suppose you take this child home, you fix the reflux, you give him meropenemate, every UTI thought that you have.
Not given meropenem
Suppose you
anytime.
do. I'm just saying, suppose you do. I take you forward in the time capsule.
Yes.
At 8 years, you do a DMSA scan. What do you think the DMSA scan is going to show?
Kidney is not going to grow, that I know for sure.
No, but what is the function?
Function is going to be more or less the same, or it may go down, and the VUR will
Okay,
remain
thank you.
either same or it will improve by age of 5 years.
No, forget VUR. We are not talking of VUR, DMSA. Okay,
Yes.
so what I'll tell you is it will probably...
Assuming no more urinary tract infections have occurred in that
It
period.
doesn't matter. Forget about urine infection. I'm telling you, he's not had a single urine infection. This DMSA scan is going to look 25-75. Now you go 10 years further. At 18, how do you think it's going to look?
Actually, my next slide is on this, but I'll still answer that. Yes.
No. How do you think it's going to look? We need to understand the natural
Geometric pro-
history of what happens before we even comment on what we are trying to do. Because at 18, this is probably going to look like 1585. This is the natural progression because the other kidney is going to take over the function. What happens between 8 and 18 is you step into puberty. You have the maximum growth that occurs during your lifespan between the pubertal growth. At that stage, your kidneys work extremely hard. And that is the stage when your GFR drops, if it is going to drop. So the prognosis will depend not on the kidney which is affected, but on the other kidney. Now, if you can assure me that the other kidney has received its complement of 1 million nephrons, this child is probably going to go through life without having any problems. Unfortunately, you cannot tell me that. So which is the test that is going to tell you whether the 1 million complement of nephrons has been received or not?
GFR.
I'm a very inexpensive doctor. I don't ask for very expensive tests.
Creatinine.
Creatinine. Unfortunately, he hasn't put a serum creatinine in the whole of that. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing, even before the creatinine becomes abnormal, if the number of nephrons is less, what is the thing that is going to pick up the fact that these kidneys are becoming abnormally functioning?
His
No, GFR is creatinine.
His creatinine was 0.4.
No, it's okay.
Yes.
Creatinine will be 0.4. In fact, that's
Yes.
not a good sign.
Yeah.
No.
0.4 creatinine. at
What
least-
happens
Yeah.
if your nephron number is low?
Gets
You
shrunk-
hyperfilter.
shrunk.
So if you hyperfilter, what are you going to pick up in the urine?
No, doctor, let
Protein.
me interrupt, doctor. Here we are addressing a child which we see in day-to-day office practice with a UTI 8-month-old.
Yes.
All of them are not going to have a small dysplastic kidneys.
No, but
and
how-
if they have a VUR
Excuse me.
with grade
No,
4,
but that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you. That dysplastic kidney on the right is something that is hitting your eye. I'm telling you that the left may also not be normal.
right? But what do I do about the left
Because
anyways
you
right
can't.
now?
But that is
Yes.
exactly what I'm trying to
Ma'am,
tell you.
please.
Hello,
Yeah.
hello. Can I interfere
Yeah, I
as a
would like
senior
to.
most?
Yes, please.
I think, Pankaj, you are going too far and too fast for the audience.
No, what-
What I'm trying to say, go back to the ultrasonography. He had shown that the side on which the VUR was there was a large kidney. Is a mildly enlarged right kidney.
Yes.
It wasn't a small kidney.
No.
It was a mildly enlarged right kidney.
In acute phase-
Believe me.
in acute phase,
so
yes.
it might have been an acute phase, or it might not have been a dysplastic kidney. We don't know. That's why I said probably 8-month-old child, not the initial UTI. There could have been the earlier.
Previous
and from
episodes.
that point of view, I agree. Only half the things that Pankaj is telling and frightening you. What I want to tell, we would do a very simple, inexpensive. One is urine, I agree, because proteinuria is an indication that there is what is called reflux nephropathy, And early identification is important to know what's going to happen. The second is a serial serum creatinine or GFR, whichever sort of you are comfortable with. That is a second thing I would do. And the third thing, a simple sonography to see what's happening to the normal kidney. Is it increasing rapidly in size? There is a compensatory hypertrophy, which will mean that the right kidney is losing its function. One doesn't have to count the nephrons or anything. I mean, that is an indication. I would do these three things. I don't know about Jyoti and...
No.
Thank you, madam. You have answered our next slide
I'm coming back to exactly the same thing. What I'm trying to tell you is what you need to follow is a creatinine and a protein creatinine ratio in these patients.
That's what my next slide is. That's
Yes.
what I'm asking you in the next slide.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Jyoti, one question which was pending for you in the previous one. and
Before
your
that, I
comments.
would like to emphasize what you put on the side. BP, blood pressure needs to be monitored. Blood
Yes.
pressure needs to be monitored. For every child after 3 years of age, blood pressure needs to be monitored at least once in a year. And definitely for this child, blood pressure needs to be monitored. Of course, you're going to make sure that he doesn't get a UTI. So if younger children, you want to screen them with urinaries, older children would come. I mean, as he grows, you would have to decrease the screenings, and he'll probably, if at all he gets a breakthrough UTI, he would be symptomatic.
Your views on circumcision for UTI before I put these key points.
Okay, so circumcision. For a normal child, 111 circumcisions need to be done to save one UTI. But for a child who's at high risk for UTI, that means who has high grades of reflux or has recurrent UTIs, you may have to do 11 UTIs to prevent one UTI. So that's the information you need to know and discuss with the parents.
So this slide will tell us about what the consensus statements by Indian Nephrology Group has been published in Indian Pediatrics, September 2011. And two of our panelists are the authors for that. So suspect UTI in any febrile infant without obvious focus of infection. Urine culture remains the gold standard for diagnosis. It's a good idea to decide whether this is a simple or a complicated UTI, because that will help us guide about the duration of the treatment. The minimum investigations for first UTI, and I take madam's point that you cannot be always very sure about it as a first UTI. All children less than 1 year undergo all three procedures. Above between 1 and 5, ultrasound followed by a DMSA at an appropriate interval. Subject to them being normal, MCU will not be required. And more than 5 years, only ultrasound. If it is normal, follow the child with all the other counseling. Antibiotic prophylaxis we have discussed, and there has been change, so I will not go into the details. How much time do we have?
Just 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, so Dr. Deshpande, you have 2 minutes left. Okay. This is for him. That's right. 8-year-old child seen because fever. She has been having UTIs for last 6 months. She was otherwise normal before that. There was no significant history mentioned on a referral note. She started having frequency, dysuria, and abdominal pain, and there was no fever at the onset. Urine routine was done almost every time and showed 4 to 6 pus cells, no RBCs, no proteins. She was treated with antibiotics off and on, and found to have some relief for a few days, only to come back again after a week with similar symptoms and a similar urine report. Urine culture showed 8 to 10 pus cells, with occasional urine showing 20 pus cells. And most of the cultures that were done showed either no growth or a growth of 100 to 10,000. Doctor, we have 1.5 minutes, so let's go fast.
T20.
What do you think?
Right. The three conditions, I mean, we could have analyzed the conditions, but the three conditions that I wanted to be aware of, what this girl has is irritable bladder syndrome or detrusor instability. Okay, what happens is that the bladder is excitable, therefore there are impulses going from the bladder at abnormal times, and therefore the classic symptoms are frequency, urgency, and dysuria secondary to the urgency and frequency that they have, and daytime wetting. The history that is often forgotten is daytime wetting. The causes for detrusor instability, I mean, apart from, you finished?
No, that's not me. That's
Right.
1 minute
I mean,
left.
apart,
for you.
not the causes, but the most common reason which is associated with detrusor instability is constipation. You need to treat that. The second factor which we often forget, and which I think is important in your practice, is carbonated drinks worsen this condition. So PepsiCo, or whether you talk of Coca-Cola, these all worsen it. At the same time, whether Deepika promotes it or no, coffee is bad for the bladder. So those who have an irritable bladder, please ask them to stop taking these carbonated drinks. They will need anticholinergic medications if they come to you, because when they come to you, they come with a frequency of 30 to 40 per day. If they have a frequency of 10 to 12, that's fine. So that's the first common condition. The second thing that you get is an underactive bladder that is usually secondary to constipation or avoidance of toilet in children because they don't go, because they're not interested. It is a necessary inconvenience, as they say. They just have to go. And the third is true detrusor sphincter dyssynergia. We don't have time to talk about that anyway. But the three things that I say, which I was very impressed that Tushar mentioned, which I had said in the past, the RRU score, which is the risk of recurrence of UTIs. Please look at constipation. Please look at the frequency of voiding. And please look at the post-micturition residue. Those are the three important things that will help you to think about a bladder bowel disturbance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deshpande. We'll conclude the session here. I thank the panelists for a very specific answers and information. Thank you, everybody.